We're going to turn to Matthew chapter 2 today. Matthew chapter 2. I'm going to read a few verses before we talk about it. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his stars when it rose and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They told him, In Bethlehem of Judea. So it is written by the prophets, And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, and by no means least among the rulers of Judah, from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me words that I may come and worship him. After listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. Okay, so today, in a hot summer day, we're going to talk about some Christmas, the birth of Christ. So, first of all, when we look at chapter 2, the Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king. So, as I mentioned, this Herod that we see in this chapter is the Herod the Great. There are many Herods. As I showed you before, there are many Herods, but this particular Herod is the one we know it as Herod the Great. So, for our calendar, this year is 2024. So, we call year 2024. The way we actually count the calendars or the year of the year is AD, right? So we call BC and AD. The BC is obviously before Christ, and AD is Anno Domini. So we separate, or we start to count the years on the year where Jesus was born. And that's how we know. But I just want to talk about this for a moment. There is some error in our calendar system. I don't know if you know. Does anybody know there is actually error in our calendar? No? Nobody knows anything about how the calendar works? It seems like no one seemed to really have any interest at all. All right. So, how about have you ever heard of AUC? AUC. Have you ever heard of that? I mean, since we actually these days we're using so many acronyms, so like there are so many of them. AUC. AUC is something that you we should probably know. It's Ev Urbe and Candida. It is the actual calendar that was used in Romans' time. What AUC is, literally, this is the year that Romans are counting years. So when you think about it, this year was started back in the time when Romans, the kingdom of Roman, started. That's how they count the AUC. AUC is actually started. AUC year 1 is literally from our calendar, BC 753 BC. That's the AUC 1. So if you actually count BC 1, which is what we know as the astronomical year 0, we call it, BC 1, is AUC 753. And AD 1, which is what we know as the year of the birth of Jesus Christ, AD 1 is AUC 754. So if you really count all those years, so this year we call it AD 2024. An AUC calendar is 2777. Then why Key is all of a sudden talking about like calendar? Because just want to really just to get a understanding of where this BC and AD is. So when we think about it, Romans actually started this calendar, and this calendar was being used in the Romans' time. And then they actually decided to change this calendar. So there is a man named Dionysius Exiguus. This name you should probably know or should remember. Dionysius Exiguus. Maybe not familiar to you at all. But Dionysius Exiguus is the person, he was the monk from Scythia. He's a Scythia monk, and under the Roman Empire, he's under the Romans' control. And he was the monk from the Scythia, the regions, and he's been ordered to come up with a different calendar. So Dionysius actually came up with the new calendar. That new calendar is what we know as AD, the calendar that we use today. So Dionysius Exiguus is the one who actually created AD. Okay, so it's a historical fact. And since then, everyone started to use this calendar. But when this actually started was 6th century. So it's not before. So AD was really not started on the day or the year that Jesus was born. So AD started way after. But they trace back. So they had to start from the basis of which year we're going to decide as BC versus AD. So this is how really came to what we know as AD today. But we know AD 1 is the year that Jesus was born. But it is actually after they had done some research, and they have done, because this AD started like way after Jesus was born. As I mentioned, it started in the 6th century. So when they actually came to really research, they realized that there's some things are not matching. What's not matching is when you look at this, the Herod was there when he ordered the wise men to look for him and then come back to me when you find him so that I may go and worship him. So according to the historical fact, the year that Herod died was BC 4. So AD 1, Herod was already dead. So it cannot be AD 1 is the day, AD 1 is the year that Jesus was born, because Herod was there. If the Herod died in BC 4, it must have happened that Jesus was born before AD 1. So what happened is AD 1 is not the year that Jesus was born. BC 4 is the year Jesus was born. So what happened is, then why are we using this calendar AD 1 and until today, 2024? That's because it was too much of a work to change it. It's just too much work because everything has to be changed. Entire world has to be changed. Document needs to be changed. Historical fact has to be changed. It's just way too much work. So people decide not to change it. Keep it the way it is, even though it's wrong. And according to this document, let's just take a look at book of Luke for a moment. Luke chapter 2. Luke chapter 2. I'm going to read from verse 1. In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registrations when Quirinius was governor of Assyria, and all went to be registered, each to his own town. So what happened is, in Romans, up until AD 270, Romans run this registers every 14 years. So this is the term that they actually had. Every 14 years, they had the people to go back to their hometown to register them. That happened every 14 years. And this was done in the BC 4. So that's why we know Jesus was born in the BC 4 instead of AD 1. So there are about 4 years differences in our calendar. So at least to have some ideas of what this, incorrectness of our calendar, just as a background. All right? All right, let's come back to Matthew chapter 2. So Jesus was born in Bethlehem. This is very important. Why Jesus had to be born in Bethlehem? That's because it was prophesied by the Micah. So when we go back to Micah chapter 5, Micah So Micah was a prophet. He actually worked in a time when Hezekiah was the king of Judah. And when he actually prophesied in chapter 5, you will see verse 2, "But you, O Bethlehem, Ephrathah, who are too little to be among the clan of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose coming forth is from of old, from ancient days." So this was prophesied around the BC 700. So it was prophesied way, way before the Jesus was born. And people knew about these prophecies. Interesting part is when you come back to Matthew chapter 2, as I mentioned, Jesus was born in Bethlehem, as it was prophesied by the prophet Micah. Bethlehem. So let's just think about the name of the city, Bethlehem. What does that mean, the name Bethlehem? Beit in Hebrew means house. So if you actually go to Israel, if you want to have a coffee, this is what you need to look for. Beit Cafe. Beit Cafe. That is coffee shop. Beit is house. Lehem. Lehem means bread. So Bethlehem means house of bread. Bethlehem. So then why Jesus had to be born in Bethlehem? In order for us to understand what this means, we need to take a look at what Jesus said. Let's go to John. John chapter 6. John chapter 6. Take a look at from John chapter 6. We're going to read from verse 48. "I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, and they died. This is the bread that comes down from heaven, so that one may eat of it and not die. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. And the bread that I'll give for the life of the world is my flesh." What did he say? He says, "I am the bread of life." Why Jesus had to be born in Bethlehem? Because he himself is the bread. What did Jesus actually say about the bread? When you think about the bread, Jesus linked the story with manna. What is the manna? Manna is the food that was supplied by God. They came from heaven. It's not something they harvest, right? When Israelites came out of Egypt and they were in the desert, in the wilderness, they could not really do anything to produce any food. So they cried out, and God allowed them to have the manna. It is the food from heaven. And that's what they eaten during the 40 years of their journey in the wilderness. That manna represent Jesus. That's why Jesus claimed himself, I am the bread from heaven. And he was the one who linked to manna. But when they were eating the manna, there are a few things we need to keep in mind. When they received the manna, and Moses ordered them, you can go out and get this manna, but when you get the manna, you get the manna per person, only for your family. Don't get too much. If you actually bring more manna, keep it and store them, you won't be able to eat those. So only get what you need for your family. But what did they do? They gather more. They brought and they realized the bread could not eat. They could not store. So what do they have to do? They have to go every day to get it. Imagine. I want you to put yourself in their shoes. In our daily lives, when we go for our grocery shopping, do you want to go to the grocery shop every day to get what you need for that day? Or you get actually, I just need to buy bunch. Like I go to Costco, I store it up for whole months so I don't have to go back and forth between, the grocery, the store. What do we want to do? We want to store it up, keep it, so we don't have to just keep going. It's too much work. It's trouble for us. But question is, why did God actually ask them to go every day to get the manna? Is that because, I want you to have the fresh bread? Is that why? Why do you think God actually have them to come to grab the manna every day? Why not store? Why not keep it somewhere? So Moses said, only time when you can store is during the time of Sabbath. You can store it up, and you should be able to eat those bread that you stored up, because on the day of Sabbath, you're not supposed to go and grab the manna, and you are not going to get manna. But people still did go out to get manna on Sabbath. They just do what God told not to do. Always, they're like, do it opposite way. That's human nature. Now go back to that story. Why did God actually had them to come to grab manna every day? It's too much trouble. You get some idea of this. Let's take a look at Jeremiah. Jeremiah chapter 2. Jeremiah chapter 2. I'm going to read from verse 9. Therefore, I still contend with you, declared the Lord, and with your children's children I will contend. For cross to the coast of Cyprus and see, or ascend to Kedar and examine with care. See if there has been such a thing. Has a nation changed its gods, even though they are not there are no gods? But my people have changed their glory for what which does not profit. Be appalled, O heavens, at this. Be shocked, be utterly desolate, declared the Lord. For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, and fountain of living waters, and hewed out a cistern for themselves, broken cisterns that can hold no water. I explained this many times when I was going through the Old Testament. What God said to Israel is that my people have committed two evils. Two evils. What is the first evil? You have forsaken me. That's the first evil. Second, the fountain of a living waters, and hew out cistern for themselves, broken cistern that can hold no water. Let's go back to the time. In the ancient day, Israel, they farm it and they harvest. In order for them to sow and harvest, there are a few things they need. Number one, they need to have sun, which they don't have a problem. Second, they need rain, the water. Sun and rain is important in the ancient day. Then what do? Sun usually get it, especially in Israel. Rain, what do you do with the rain? Do you get water, or when you get rain when you need it? No, you don't. In ancient day, I mentioned about the idols that people used to worship. There are two idols that you know very well. One is Baal, the other one is Ashtaroth. Well-known story from old days. You probably remember the story that Elijah was actually having a, event with the idol worshiper. And Elijah said, let's find out who is the true God. And they actually just, put the altars, and then let's see who's going to respond. And the priest of the Baals and Ashtaroth, they try to cry out to their God, but nothing happened. But when Elijah prayed to the Lord, there was a fire came down from heaven and burned up the altar. You know that story. So from the ancient day, there are two, out of many, many idols, there are two well-known idols, Baal and Ashtaroth. Then why were they actually worshiping Baals and Ashtaroth compared to any other idols back then? It is important for you to understand this. Baal means Lord. Sarah called Abraham Baal. Baal means master or Lord. Baal is male god. Ashtaroth is female god. Okay? So Baal is the god of heaven, and Ashtaroth is goddess of earth. Why there are two idols always worshiping back then? It's very simple. When you look at the Old Testament, there are so many servants and priests, and there's a hostess in the altar of those two idols. What they used to do is they actually have the women's, and there are mans who's serving that altar of those two gods. What they do is they come together and they have group sex in front of that altar. There are Many people, they're worshiper of those two idols. They have a group sex. When they're having all kinds of group sex in front of those idols, what they're trying to do is they're trying to make those two idols, which is the Baals and Ashtaroth, to see and watch them having the sex in front of it, to make them and cultivate them, so that Baals and Ashtaroth have the sexual relationship. And what it does is the Baals, because of those two gods, a sexual relationship, Baals eject. That ejections represent the rain. Do you understand what I'm saying? So what they're doing is, literally they're believing between the Baals and Ashtaroth having the sexual relationship and the Baal's ejaculation is the one that they're going to have a rain down. So imagine from the human's perspective, in order for Israel to worship Jehovah, which is their God, there's so much regulations and law and statute they have to follow. It's very difficult to follow. Worship the Lord. Compared to worshiping other idols, what do you think you're having? You have the sexual pleasure. You're enjoying it. You're getting rained. So then, by the human nature, which one do you think you would enjoy worshiping? Jehovah or the idol? We don't have to discuss. For most of the people, it's enjoying worshiping idols. That's why there are so many countries and so many even Israelites worshiping those two idols for that reason. Why am I talking about this idols and all of a sudden? Because they're worshiping the God who will bring the waters and rain. I don't care whether it's Jehovah. I don't care whether it's Baal. Who cares? As long as I get rain, so that I can harvest. So whoever provides the rains, I can go. Whoever is going to give me. And then they started to worship as many gods as they could possibly worship, so they can get the rain in. And they got to the point, you know what? I think it's not really working out very well. What do we need to do is, when we get rain, let's dug up the hole. And then let's store up the water so we don't have to wait for the rain anymore. So this is what I mentioned here. This is what God's saying. Let's go back to that Jeremiah chapter 2 again. Verse 13 again. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and hewed out a cistern for themselves, broken cistern that can hold no water. What they did was, you forgot about me, you forsaken me, I am the God of a living water, but you don't care about me anymore because you decide to dug up the holes and keep the water there. So whenever you need water, you supply the water from the cisterns and do what you need. So then they don't have to come to God anymore. I can supply my own water. I don't need to go and worship either Jehovah or any other God. I can help myself. That is exactly what's happening in today's world. Do you go to God for everything what you need? No. What do? We wake up in the morning, we go to work, we earn money, we actually buy things what we need, we supply for our food. What do we need God for? Most people don't need God because I can help myself. I can go out, work, earn money. I can buy what I need. I don't need God. So this is why people don't look for God anymore. Because I can help myself. I don't need God to help me anymore. This started in the ancient day. Just by storing the water. They were thinking, I can store up the water that I don't have to go to God anymore. I can supply the water by myself. I can get anything that I want. So it's too much trouble for me to go to God and asking for rain. And God is claiming that is evil. That you don't look for me and that you are trying to help yourself. Going back to what I said before, why did God ask people in the desert to come and get manna every single day? Don't store it up. Come to me every day. This is what God is asking. You come to me for what you need every single day. Then, let's just equate to the story of Jesus. Jesus claimed himself, I am the living bread. Come to me. So let's think about, I just read the one sections of it. Let's go back to John again. John chapter 6. When you look at the John chapter 6 is actually about Jesus feeding 5,000 people. Jesus fed 5,000 people with literally with 5 breads and 2 fishes. So people ate it. Now, I'm going to read from verse 22. On the next day, the crowd that remained on the other side of the sea saw that there had been only one boat there, and that Jesus had not entered the boat with his disciples, but that his disciples had gone away alone. Other boats from Tiberias came near the place where they had eaten the bread after the Lord had given thanks. So, when the crowd saw that Jesus was not there, nor his disciples, they themselves got into the boat and went to Capernaum seeking Jesus. When they found him on the other side of the seas, they said to him, Rabbi, when did you come here? Jesus answered them, Truly, truly, I say to you, you are seeking me not because you saw signs, but because you ate your fill of your loaves. Do not work for the food that perishes, but for the food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give to you. For on him God the Father has set his seal. Then they said to him, What must we do to be doing the works of God? Jesus answered them, This is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he has sent. So they said to him, Then what sign do you do that we may see and believe you? What work do you perform? Our father ate the manna in the wilderness, as it is written, He gave them bread from heaven to eat. Jesus then said to them, Truly, truly, I say to you, it was not Moses who gave you the bread from heaven, but my Father gave you the true bread from heaven. For bread of God is he whom comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. They said to them, Sir, give us this bread always. Let me explain this. They ate the bread the day before. Plenty. Did they have to work? No. They just got the bread for free. Did they work? No. They did absolutely nothing. Only thing that they did was they followed Jesus. And they were able to get the loaves of bread for free. Next day, they followed Jesus. They got on the boat and followed Jesus to the other side. Why? Because they want the bread. So if I follow Jesus, I don't have to work. I don't have to pay. Only thing I have to do is just follow him. Then I will get bread. That's why they came. They were thinking about just filling their stomach. It's easy thinking. I don't have to work. I don't have to pay. Only thing is I just follow Jesus. Then I will get enough bread every day. That's why they follow. And Jesus rebuked them. You followed me because you ate the bread and you want to continue to eat bread. And then Jesus said, I am the bread. I am the one who actually came from heaven. And they asked us, what sign can you show us? What sign? Didn't you eat bread yesterday? What more sign do I have to show you? But for them, it's not good enough. And exactly what they said was, hey, Moses gave us the bread. And Jesus said, no, Moses is not the one who gave you the bread. My Father is the one who gave you the bread. The bread your ancestor ate and they all died. But the bread that I will give you, you'll be able to eat eternally. So there is a difference between the people and Jesus. They're talking about the bread. They're both talking about the bread, but they're not talking about the same bread. The people are talking about the physical bread that they will eat and fill their stomach. Jesus was talking about the bread himself. They're talking about bread, but they're two different bread. People looking for physical bread, Jesus was talking about the living bread, which is himself. It's a bread, but it's a different kind of bread. When you actually take a look at John chapter 4, there is a discussion between the Samaritan woman and Jesus. They were talking about water, two different water. The Samaritan water was talking about the water that they drink and quench their thirst. Jesus was talking about the living water, which himself. So Jesus was always talking to people, but they were always talking two different things. The humans are always thinking about the bread and water that we eat. That's what they're seeking. Jesus was talking about water and bread, but completely different water and bread. What are we looking today? When you actually look at people praying, what are they praying for? They're praying for their job. They're praying for their health. They're praying for their well-being. They're praying for all the stuff that they need. Is no different than people who follow Jesus at this time. I want the bread. Feed me. Get me a job so that I can work, so that I can make money, so that I can pay what I need. That's what people are looking for. Jesus was talking about completely different things. I am the bread. People come and ask for bread. So, I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'm going to cover this later on, but you know the Lord's Prayer. And I'm sure many of your church also repeat every week Lord's Prayer. Correct? When you take a look at the Lord's Prayer, what's in there? Give us daily bread. Give us daily bread. Once again, I'm not going to go into too much detail of the Lord's Prayer today. But when you pray for give us a daily bread, what are you thinking of? The loaf of bread? Food? That's what we're thinking, right? When you look at the Lord's Prayer, Jesus is not talking about the bread. It's not the bread that we're thinking of. It is not the food that we're thinking of. It's a different bread. What bread is it? This is what we just saw from John chapter 6. People are talking about the bread they're eating. Jesus was talking about the living bread, which is himself. Jesus is the word. Why God actually gave the manna every day and have them to come to get that bread every single day? Why so much trouble? Because I need you to come to me every single day. But that's not what we do. We ask for bread every day, but we don't ask for Jesus every day. We don't ask for the word every day. We look for something else. We look for something that fills our stomach, is what we want. Jesus is talking about completely different things. Why did Jesus have to be born in Bethlehem? Because he was showing us, I am the living bread. That's why Jesus had to be born in Bethlehem, not in other places, not in Jerusalem. Coming back to Matthew chapter 2. It says, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him, and assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, and inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. Herod is a ruler of Jerusalem, and correct? He's ruling the Israel people. Does he know where the Messiah to be born? Herod does not know. Herod asked people, priest and scribe. I'm going to ask you this. Who is a scribe? What do they do? What do scribe do? Priest, we know, right? What do scribe do? Correct. Scribe is the people who copies the scroll. They write, because there's no way to print like today. They copy the word by word, which means scribe knows the Bible the most. Not the Pharisees, not the priest, not the Sadducees. The people who know the Bible the most is the scribe. So when the priest and the scribe are together, Herod asked, where the Christ to be born? He doesn't know. But the priest and the scribe knew. Oh, according to the scripture, Christ to be born in Bethlehem. And what did these wise men follow? Star. Right? Who are these wise men? Are they Israelites? No, they're not Israelites. They're from different country. Most likely they either from Babylon or Persia somewhere. They saw the stars and followed. So they saw the stars and followed the star, but where do they actually come? Where do they come right now? They came to Jerusalem. They came to Jerusalem. Why? If they followed the star, shouldn't they be going to Bethlehem? No? Why did they come to Jerusalem? Since they followed the stars, obviously star is not exactly pointing out exactly one place, right? So, from wise men's perspective, they only followed the stars, assuming the king will be born in the city, the capital. So they automatically thinking the king must be born in Jerusalem because that's the capital of Judea. So they went to Jerusalem instead of they went to Bethlehem. Because they assumed the king must be born in Jerusalem. Where else the king will be born? So they automatically went to Jerusalem, where the Herod stayed, the palace. So they asked, where is the king was born? But imagine, Herod, if you read the document that I actually gave you, the homework, Herod is truly politicians, and he actually had wanted to have a tight control over his own kingdom. If you know his story, he killed so many of his sons to maintain the controls and ruler. That's how much he were freak. Then now what he's hearing is, where is the king born in the city? He's the one who is even killing his own son. Not to mention about another king will succeed him. So in his head, what is this news that I'm hearing? Another king was born to succeed, and he's going to push me out? Of course, he's not going to allow. But here's the interesting things. Everybody was talking about it. They assembled the chief priests and the scribes of the people. And he was asking where the Christ to be born. And they all said, oh, according to the Micah, he's supposed to be born in Bethlehem. And listen to what Herod is saying. Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared, and he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word that I too may come and worship him. After listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. So, high priest and the scribe knew where the Christ to be born, in Bethlehem. And they saw the wise men came from afar looking for that Christ. Give you the background. Jerusalem to Bethlehem. Do you know how far between those two cities? You heard about this Jerusalem and Bethlehem many times. How far is from Jerusalem to Bethlehem? Have you ever questioned how far that is? You've been hearing about the Jerusalems and Bethlehem so many times, especially during Christmas time. But you don't even know how far these two cities apart. I'll give you 10 kilometers. 10 kilometers. You know what that distance is? Less than 6 miles. You could imagine how close it is. It's very close. So when you think of it, oh, that's around the corner. It is around the corner. Of course, the road is not as good as what it is today. So it's taking much longer time to get there for sure. But still, from the distance wise, it's not that far at all. So then, wise men, after they heard, because these wise men don't know anything about the Bible or the prophecies of a Christ. They just follow the star. They know nothing about the Bible. So of course they have no idea where the Christ to be born. But the scribes and the high priest knew where the Christ to be born. And after the wise men heard the Christ to be born in Bethlehem, they went on their way. What about the priest? What about the scribes? Did they follow after wise men? None of the high priest, none of the scribes, none of the Israelites searched for the Christ. They did not go after them. They knew the Bible. They knew the prophecies. They knew exactly where the Christ to be born. They didn't see the stars. They had no interest to find out about the Christ. Only the wise men went on their way. Neither Herod, neither high priest, neither scribes followed them. Did they have any interest? No. They had no interest. They knew, but they had no interest. Wise men did not know, but they had interest. Isn't that kind of strange that non-Israelites follow the star to find the Christ, whereas Israelites did not? But the question is this: why star? Why star is the one that guide the wise men? Let's take a look at Revelations. Revelations chapter 22. I'm going to read verse 16. I, Jesus, have sent my angel to testify to you about these things for the churches. I am the root and the descendants of David, the bright morning star. What does he say? I am the bright morning star. He himself is the star. And star is the one that guides the wise men to find him. And when you look at this, the prophecy says this: for from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Shepherd. Who is Jesus? Jesus is the shepherd. Right? Jesus is the shepherd. And then they follow the stars. Verse 9 says, after listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. Now, I'm going to talk about a few things. I'm going to see how much you know the Bible well. Okay, here comes the quiz. How many wise men came to look for the Christ? How many wise men came to see the Christ? You have to think. How many of them have you seen on the Christmas card?
I'm just afraid to question.
On a Christmas day, what do you see? You always see in the skid or the card or some sort of like decorations, all you see is the three wise men. Many people believe there are three wise men. According to the Bible, there is no mention how many wise men came. But people believe that three wise men came. Second quiz. Where did wise men come to see the Christ? Where did wise men come to see the Christ? The manger? It's not? Just let's be specific. Where? House? Which house? Huh? Did the wise men and the shepherd come to worship the Jesus at the manger? No? Let's go back to the Christmas card again and a decoration. What do you see? The shepherd and wise men, they all worship together at where Jesus was born, the manger. That's what we see on Christmas card and a decoration. According to the scripture, no. Only shepherds from the field came and worshipped Jesus at the manger in Bethlehem. Wise men, according to the scriptures in verse 11 says, and going into the house. This is not where Jesus was born. And when you see this, you will see there's no Joseph. Here, read one more time. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother. They only saw the child and Mary. There's no Joseph there. It's not Bethlehem. So, shepherds and the wise men, they never saw each other. They never worshiped Jesus together at the manger. Now think about this for a moment. Jesus was born in Bethlehem in the inn. Where was Jesus was born? So let's go to book of Luke. Chapter 2, we're going to read from verse 4. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, from the town of Nazareth to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be registered with Mary, his betrothed, who was with child. When while they were there, the time came to her to give birth, and she gave birth to her firstborn son, and wrapped him in a swaddling cloth, and laid him in a manger, because there was no place for them in the inn. So they could not find a place to stay in the inn. So Jesus was born and laid in the manger. Now the question is, what is the manger made out of? What is the manger made out of? It's made out of wood. It's made out of wood. When Jesus was born, the place where Jesus actually laid is on the wood. When Jesus Christ died, he was laid on the wood. He was born on the wood. He died on the wood. And that's Jesus was born. Like for most of babies, when they were born, they were placed in nice places. But Jesus was not. And when wise men brought the gift, coming back to Matthew again, verse 11, one more time. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, with his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. So they brought 3 gifts. This is why many people think there is 3 wise men, because there's 3 gifts, which makes absolutely no sense. If you actually have 5 gifts, that means there are 5 men? No. There's no mention of how many wise men came. But they brought 3 gifts. But why these 3 gifts? Let's think about gold, frankincense, and myrrh. When you ever studied tabernacle with me, I went over all the meanings of the material that was used to build the tabernacle. And when you go into the sanctuary, which is holy place or holy of a holy place, what's inside the holy place? When you walk into that place, you see nothing but gold. Everything is made out of gold. Why gold? Why not silver? Why not bronze? Why silver? Because I mentioned gold represent goddess. Gold represent goddess. So Christ is come as a king, and he's a god. That's what represent the gold. That's why they brought gold. Okay, we get that. Frankincense. What is the frankincense is about? What does a frankincense we see in the Bible? Let's go to Exodus chapter 30. Exodus chapter 30. I'm going to read from verse 34. The Lord said to Moses, "Take sweet spices, stacked, and ancha, and galbaum, sweet spices with pure frankincense of each shell there be an equal part, and make an incense blended by the perfumers, seasoned with salt, pure and holy. You shall beat some of it very smalls, and put part of it before the testimony in the tent of meeting where I shall meet with you. I shall be most holy for you, and the incense that you shall make according to the compositions you shall not make for yourself. It shall be for you holy to the Lord. Whoever makes any like it to use as perfume shall be cut off from his people. God gave Moses how to make this frankincense specifically that used in this sanctuary, which is the holy place. So when you actually walk into the holy place, on the left side, there is a lamp, golden lamp. To the right, there is a bread table. In front, there's altar, incense altar. And that's where they burned the frankincense, only for God. And the wise men brought the frankincense. Why? Because he was born as a Christ, to be only to the Lord. Third, they brought myrrh. What does myrrh is used for? Correct. It's used for dead body. Woman brought the myrrh after Jesus Christ died. So the myrrh is used for the dead one. Myrrh. What is that myrrh? I'm going to talk about this myrrh for a second. In order for you to understand this myrrh, there are a few stories you need to understand. Do you know why Jesus had to be born from Mary? Why Jesus had to be born from Mary? Well, we can say, well, because the Mary is descendants of King David. Okay. Mary is not the only one, of course, descendants of King David. Why Mary? Before I answer, there are a few things I'm going to talk about, going back to the Old Testament again. When Israelites came out of Egypt, when they came to the wilderness, where was the first place they ended up? Do you remember the first place they ended up? Okay. This is how much we don't know about the Bible. So, let's take a look at where they ended up. Let's go to Let's go to Exodus chapter 15. Exodus chapter 15. I'm going to read from verse 22. Then Moses made Israel set out from the Red Sea, and they went into the wilderness of Shur. They went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink the water of Marah because it was bitter. Therefore it was named Marah. And the people grumbled against Moses, saying, What shall we drink? And we cried to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a log. And he threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. There the Lord made for them a statue and a ruler. And there he tested them, saying, If you will diligently listen to the voice of the Lord your God, and do that which is right in his eyes, and give ears to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the disease on you that I put on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord your healer. Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, and they encamped there by the water. Okay. After they came out of Egypt, they crossed the Red Sea. The first place they arrived was Marah. They were thirsty. They needed the water to drink. But they found the water, but could not eat. Was bitter, could not eat. So what did Moses do? He took the log, the branch, and threw into the water. Water became sweet that people could eat. Now, if you remember what Moses said to Pharaoh, when Moses came to Egypt, he said something to Pharaoh. What did he say? When he came to Pharaoh, what did he ask for? Do you remember exactly what he asked for? Let's go to Exodus chapter 8. Exodus chapter 8. We're going to read from verse 27. We must go 3 days' journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to the Lord our God as he tells us. So Pharaoh said, I will let you go to sacrifice to the Lord your God in the wilderness, only you must not go very far away. Plead for me. What did Moses ask Pharaoh? Moses asked, We must go 3 days' journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to the Lord our God as he tells us. What was the plan for Moses? Moses' plan was take all Israelites out of Egypt and taking them to the promised land. Isn't that correct? Why is he saying this? Why is he saying we must go 3 days' journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to the Lord our God as he tells us? What does this mean? It makes no sense. He's supposed to take the entire Israelite out of Egypt and taking them to the promised land. What is this 3-day journey he's talking about? That's exactly what Moses asked the Pharaoh. Let us go 3-day journey into the wilderness and worship our God, which is very different from what we know that Moses did. Why is he saying this? And then what I just said before, what I just read you in Exodus chapter 15. Let's go back one more time. Verse 22 again. Then Moses made Israel set out from the Red Sea, and they went into the wilderness of Ashur. They went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. So they went into 3 days journey. Where did they reach? Marah. This is exactly what he was talking about. 3-day journey into the wilderness. When he traveled for 3 days, Marah is where he reached. And he found the water they could not eat. Why Marah? Marah means bitterness. Marah means Egyptians dead. It's death. Water is dead. He threw the branch, the wood branch, to the water, and the water became sweet water for them to drink. Water. Going back to John chapter 4, Samaritan woman was talking about the water that draw from the well. Jesus was talking about, that's not the water I'm talking about. I'm talking about the living water. What is that wood? The cross. The death of Jesus Christ. His death and resurrection. The 3 days. Marah means death. At the death, they found the living water. What do we need to do? When we believe in Jesus Christ, we receive the baptism. What does that baptism mean? Baptism means we go under the water and we come out of the water. What does that mean? We die and live with Christ. That's what that baptism means. We die first to resurrect. Jesus had to die for him to resurrect. The death has to come first to resurrect and give us a living water. This is what Marah is for. Once again, I asked you a question before. Why did Jesus have to come from Mary? Mary means Maria. You hear the name Maria. Maria, Mary is the same. Maria, Mary, Miriam, Moses' sister. Miriam, Mary, Maria, it's the same name. Means death. Bitterness. Why did Jesus have to come from Mary? It has to come from death. If you look at the Bible very closely, almost 90% of a woman who was always with Jesus had a name Mary. When Jesus died and buried, women who followed him to the tomb are all Mary. You want to take a look? Matthew. Matthew chapter 28. Verse 1. Now after the Sabbath, towards the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. Mary and Mary. You want to take a look at it a little further? Let's take a look at Mark chapter 16. Verse 1. When the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, the Salome brought spice so that they might go and anoint him. Okay, so let's take a look at Luke 24. Verse 10. Now it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, and Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them who told these things to the apostles. And even last person who was with Jesus was Mary Magdalene. There's so many women always around Jesus. They had the name Mary. Why? That represent the death of Jesus Christ, and that's where he has to come from. That's why Jesus has to go through Mary's womb to come. This is all connected. This is not just a new story from the New Testament, but it's connected from the Old Testament. And there was a sign, there was a story behind and how it had to happen. Now coming back to Matthew again. Now you understand why wise men had to bring 3 gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Myrrh is same as Mara. That's why it's used for the dead body. That was prepared for the death of Jesus Christ. Verse 13 says, Now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, Rise, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him. And he rose and took the child and his mother by night and departed to Egypt and remained there until the death of Herod. He was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet, Out of Egypt I called my son. So, where did they go? They went to Egypt, right? They went to Egypt. But where they were before they went to Egypt? Where they were before they went to Egypt? Many people think they went to Egypt after Jesus was born, immediately to Egypt. So from Bethlehem to Egypt. When you think about the story, when Herod ordered to kill the babies, let's go to book of Luke for a second. Actually, before we go to Luke, let's just read a few more verses from Matthew chapter 2. I'm going to read from verse 16 on. Then Herod, when he saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, became furious and sent and killed all the male children in Bethlehem and in all that region who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had ascertained from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and loud lamentations, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be comforted because they are no more. So Herod ordered the child, age of 2 and under, to be killed. What we can tell from this story is that it's not exactly the same year that Jesus was born. Why? He ordered to kill the baby under 2 years old, which means time had passed. Otherwise, he would have actually ordered to kill the babies like 1 year old, not 2 years old, right? That means the time had passed, which means Jesus did not go to Egypt right after he was born. Time had passed already. And I told you before, what's the distance between Jerusalem to Bethlehem? 10 kilometers, which is very, very short. But they waited and waited. Herod waited for who? Wise men to come back. For how long? Years. He had done nothing but waiting for the wise men to come back to him. So the year had passed. He realized that he's not coming back, and they're not coming back. So now he ordered to kill the babies under 2 years old and under. Now, go back to Luke. We're going to read from verse 20. Luke chapter 2, verse 20. And the shepherd returned, glorifying and praising God for all they had heard and seen, as it had been told him. And at the end of 8 days, when he saw circumcised, he was called Jesus, the name given by the angel before he was conceived in the womb. So, if the Israelites' baby's born, when do they circumcise the baby? 8 days. 8 days they circumcise, right? So he was there for 8th day to be circumcised. And the next, verse 22. And when the time came for their purification according to the law of Moses, they brought him up to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. As it is written in the law of the Lord, every male who first opened the womb shall be called holy to the Lord, and to offer a sacrifice according to what is said in the law of the Lord, a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. Now there was a man in Jerusalem whose name was Simeon, and this man was righteous and devout and waiting for the consolation of Israel, and the Holy Spirit was upon him. What did they do? According to the verse 22, says the time came for their purifications according to the law of Moses. What is this purification? What is the time for purification? In order for you to understand this, you have to understand the Leviticus. All right, so let's go to Leviticus. Leviticus chapter 12. Leviticus chapter 12, we're going to read from verse 1. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the people of Israel, saying, If a woman conceives and bears a male child, then he shall be unclean 7 days. As at the time of her menstruations, she shall be unclean. And on the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskins shall be circumcised. Then he shall continue for 30 days in the blood of her purifying. She shall not touch anything holy, nor come into the sanctuary until the days of her purifying are completed. But if she bears a female child, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks, as in her menstruations, and she shall continue in the blood of her purifying for 66 days. And then the days of her purifyings are completed, whether for a son or for daughter, she shall bring to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting a lamb a year old for a burnt offering, and a pigeon or turtle dove for a sin offering. And he shall offer it before the Lord and make atonement for her. Then she shall be clean from the flow of her blood. This is the law for her who bears a child, either male or female. And if she cannot afford a lamb, then she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, one for a burnt offering and the other for a sin offering. And the priest shall make atonement for her, and she shall be clean. So what is the days? How many days have passed? "33 days. When the boy is born, the purification period is 33 days to be clean. For a woman, 66 days. This is why I mentioned, the woman lives longer than man, right? Because men were made out of the dust of the earth, woman's made out of the bone. It's a better quality. Woman has a better quality than man. That's why they survive longer than men. And it takes a longer time to be purified, which means woman consumes a lot more out of mother than a boy. It takes a longer time to recover for the baby girl than baby boy. Because the baby boy only takes 33 days to be purified, but woman, the baby girl, takes 66 days. It takes double. Surely the woman is a better product and consumes a lot more things out of the woman's. But anyway, so at least the 33 days had passed for Mary to really purify herself. Right? Where did she come? She came to Jerusalem. So she did not move Jesus from Bethlehem to Egypt. They actually went to their house, the Bethlehem to where? Where is their house? Where is this house? Where is this house? Where was Jesus grow up? Jerusalem? Nazareth. Nazareth is their house. So, they went to Nazareth, and that's where they met with who? Wise men. They went to the house, right? And then they stayed there for how long? 33 days. Right? 33 days. And then after 33 days, then what? They came to Jerusalem to offer, right? But what did they offer? What did Mary offer, according to book of Luke? According to the Luke, it says, verse 24 says, offer a sacrifice according to what is said in the law of the Lord, a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. According to the law of Moses, 2 turtle doves or pigeons means they're poor. They're very poor. They could not offer a lamb, so they had to give either turtle doves or the pigeons. So they were staying in Nazareth, went to Jerusalem, went back, and then they went to Egypt afterwards. So as I mentioned, almost 2 years had passed from the time when wise men came to visit the Herod. So there's a time lapse. It is not something that happened like right at the moment when Jesus was born. This is really just had some time in between. And when Herod ordered to kill the babies born, 2 years old or under, that's why he ordered to be killed like that. So now we can see there is a time gap from, one chapter to another chapter, or one story to another story. When we have to kind of like link this all together to really see what is happening. So coming back to Matthew chapter 2 again. Then the question is, why Egypt? Why Egypt? Of course, there are some other countries they can flee. Why do they have to go to Egypt? When you think about it, this is the story that happened at the time of Moses. Exactly the same. Starting from Egypt. Before Jesus started his ministry, where was he? 40 days in wilderness. Now I want you to link those together. Egypt, 40, and Promised Land. Do you see the story mapping? It's the same story. So what did he say? Verse 15, Matthew chapter verse 15 says, and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. Out of Egypt, the called out of sons. Israel was called out of Egypt as well. They gone through the wilderness for 40 years to reach the Promised Land. They crossed the Jordan River. Remember, before Jesus Christ started his ministry, where was Jesus to be baptized? Jordan River. Jordan River. People from Egypt, when Moses brought them out of Egypt, they went to the wilderness. They crossed the Jordan River. But once again, who led Israel to the Promised Land? Moses? Joshua. Not Moses. Moses could not go into Promised Land. God said, you cannot enter into that land, because he actually just, tapped the rock twice, right? He was not allowed to get into the Promised Land. But Joshua took the lead and brought Israel to the promised land. Joshua, what is it? Joshua is Jesus. Joshua is a Hebrew name. Jesus is Greek name. Joshua, Jesus is the same name. Now you can see what happened with Moses exactly happened with Jesus. That's a replication. That's exactly the same copy of what's happening. Now, coming back to Matthew again, verse 17 says, "Then was it fulfilled what was spoken by the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be comforted because they are no more." What does this mean? What does this prophecy mean? Do you understand what this prophecy really means? Other than what is recorded in here, we just read it once. What does this mean? Does it mean anything to you? What does this prophecy means? A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be comforted because they are no more. So what we can think of is, maybe because all the child 2 years old and under was killed by Herod, well, all mother was cried, right? Every mother who had a baby was killed by the Herod, they all cried. So I'm sure there was a full of cries in Jerusalem or the surrounding area. But that's not the story of this prophecies. Let's think about this. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and loud lamentation. Rachel weeping for her children. Why Rachel? Who is Rachel, by the way? Who is Rachel? Whose wife? Huh? I didn't hear you well. Jacob. So Rachel is a mother of whom? Benjamin. Right? Rachel is a mother of Joseph and Benjamin. Let's think about this for a moment. Jacob loved Rachel. Right? How long Jacob worked for his uncles to really marry to Rachel? 14 years. 14 years. When we went over Matthew chapter 1, what did we go over? 14 generation, 14 generation, 14 generation. Didn't we go through 14 generation? Right? I actually mentioned why Matthew emphasized 14th generations. He made it to be 14th generations, right? Jacob really loved Rachel. Leah, according to the scripture, he hated Leah, but loved Rachel. So, when reached the 14th year, he was about to marry to Rachel. Baraban, his uncles, gave him Leah. So he was upset. He was mad. And uncle said, in our town, there is no customs that, the second one married before the first one. So if you want to marry to Rachel's, you have to work for another 14 years. So he worked another 14 years to get Rachel, right? And Jacob loved Rachel the most. And when you look at stories from Genesis, Leah, since she was not loved, she was literally wanted to have a baby for her husband. So she racing with her sister Rachel, who will have a more child for her husband, right? But Rachel could not have a baby. So later on, Rachel finally had a baby, Joseph. But what happened? After she bare the son Joseph, she also had a second son, Benjamin. While she had a baby, Benjamin, she died. Right? So let's go back to the story. Genesis for a second. Genesis chapter 35. We're going to read from 16. Genesis chapter 35, verse 16. Then they journeyed from Bethel. When they were still some distance from Ephraim, Rachel went into labor, and she had hard labor. And when her labor was at its hardest, the midwife said to her, "Do not fear, for you have another son." And as her soul was departing, for she was dying, she called his name Ben-Oni, but his father called him Benjamin. So Rachel died, and she was buried on the way to Ephraim, that is Bethlehem. And Jacob set up a pillar over her tomb. It is the pillar of Rachel's tomb, which is there to this day. Israel journeyed on and pitched his tent beyond the tower of Eder. So, as she delivered the second son, Benjamin, she died, and she buried near to Bethlehem. Now, but the voice was heard in Ramah, weeping loud and lamentation. Rachel weeping her children, she refused to be comforted because they are no more. What does it mean? What does Rachel has to do with this, her children? Rachel never seen Joseph or Benjamin to be sold. Jacob was there with Rachel, and she died as she delivered Benjamin. Rachel never lost her children. While she was living, she never saw her children was lost. Joseph was sold after Rachel's death, so Rachel never saw her children to be lost. So what is this means to refuse to be comforted because they are no more? Because she never saw her children to be lost at all. But let's think about this for a moment. Once again, Jacob loved Rachel so much. The reason Jacob loved Joseph and Benjamin the most among all other sons, because Joseph and the Benjamins are the sons of Rachel. They're beloved. They're beloved. Favorite sons. Who is the beloved Son of God? Jesus. And now, think about this. How can we comfort the mother who lost their children? How can the mother be consoled if the child is lost? I mean, there are many mother here. Imagine you lost your child. How can you be comforted if you lost your child? Do you think you could ever be comforted? Never. If you lost your child, you'll never be comforted. No matter who says what, you will never be comforted. There's only one way to be comforted. Do you know what that is? There's only one to be comforted. If you think about the stories in the Bible, what's that? Correct. If your child is come alive again, mother will be comforted. Remember the story of a mother who had a child and the boy died saying, my head, and he died. And she ran to Elijah, and Elijah came over to him and resurrected him. When the boy came back to the mother, she was comforted. Only way for mother to be comforted is when the child is alive again, resurrected again. Then you will be comforted. Other than that, nothing can be comforted. The child has to come alive again, has to be resurrected. Many child at that time died. Many child had died. 2 years and under all died. What do you think the mother will be comforted? Nothing but until the boys are resurrected. Who's going to bring the resurrection? Jesus is. Jesus is the one who can resurrect. Nothing could be comforted until the child is resurrected again. Rachel, who's weeping for her child, but will be comforted when Jesus brings back their lives back. This is why Jesus had to come to resurrect them. All right, I need to really just, I wanted to finish the chapter 3, but I will save it for the next week.